Good morning, ma'am and sirs. I am very um, privileged to be joining you in this teleconference this morning. And I would like to talk about mental health in the time of COVID. As of the moment, we probably think of mental health. And when we think of mental health, we think of probably mobility, or the converse could be also true, immobility. But before we begin, let me just define mental health. So, according to the World Health Organization, mental health is a state of well being where the individual realizes his abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. If we look at the World Health Organization's definition of mental health, it is no longer simply talking about the absence of disease or mental conditions, mental health disorders, but it also emphasizes the state of being well. Okay. And if you would look at the definition, this is where the individual realizes his abilities. Okay. So at this point, maybe we can do a self check to determine if we still are very much cognizant of our abilities. Okay. Can cope with the normal stresses of life without necessary disruptions, and can work productively and fruitfully. Okay. And lastly, we still are able to show our community and interest, okay, or foster our community interest. Why? Because a person who is mentally healthy is still able to contribute to his or her community. Okay. However, when we talk about COVID-19, the basic premise here is that COVID-19 is unprecedented. So it's a very unusual situation, and it does not fall under the category of normal stresses. And so we can expect that during this time, most likely some people have difficulty coping, okay, and their mental health is undermined. So I divided the talk into three parts, recognizing the unique situation or circumstances of our school heads. So the three parts would be, the first one would be, what issues do we in general grapple with? And then, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, po. Ay, sige po, sir. I-adjust ko po. One moment, please. Um,
Ayan. Si Miss Kryza, oh, medyo lakasan mo yung voice mo. Talagang ganyan kasi siya, maaluman. So, ayan.
Okay po. Is this better po ba, sir, ma'am? Or, okay na po. Better po. Sige po. I will just hold on to the, ano na lang po. Okay. Sige. Alright, if I can backtrack just a bit po. Okay, so like I said a while ago, we talked about the definition of mental health. And I also said that the basic premise here is that COVID-19 is actually unprecedented. So it does not fall under the category of normal stresses. So I divided the talk into three parts. This is not going to be very long, but the three parts would be, the first would be talking about what we would feel in general when we are faced with these kinds of crises. The second would be what would our students or teachers possibly be facing, and well, of course, as leaders, it would concern us. And then finally, what do you face in your personal life? So it's about all of us. Now, to begin, when we talk about the COVID-19, it's expected that we may all go through these things. Now, we may not go through all of them, but we may go through some of them, and we may go through them in varying degrees. For example, we may be facing issues of anxiety because of the uncertainty of the situation. I will be zeroing in on this a little later. And then we also talk about the ambiguity. How sure, what is going to happen, etc. And this would cause us to feel anxious. Why? Because human beings are designed to exhibit or to look for a sense of control. And in situations where we know that we are not able to control the outcome of certain events, we feel anxious. And then, of course, there's the issue of destabilization. Some of us may have lack or insufficient supplies. And the same is true with us at home. No? Some of our household supplies are probably running low, not as others experience, but probably, um, yes, po. Okay. But probably in our situation. And then we also have worry because we wonder what would life be after ECQ? Will I be infected with a coronavirus disease? Will the Philippines ever get out of it? What's going to happen with the healthcare system? What's going to happen with my job? How about our teaching? What's going to happen with online instruction? Is it possible? Is it feasible? Okay, so these are very valid concerns. And then for some, they could feel frustrated because of the isolation and boredom. Now, just to share, for example, in my situation, I know that the Filipino people are going through a lot of issues. They have issues with lack, etc. However, just yesterday, it weighed down on me that the simple pleasures of life are really taken for granted. No? Even the mere chance of going to the bookstore is already something that we cannot do now. So I was really thinking about it. Oh, it's very difficult pala na, to give up some of the things that we have been so used to. So some of us can experience boredom because of isolation. Okay. And especially if we have a very active group at work. No, we usually collaborate with people. We expect to feel certain feelings of isolation. Take note, even in the presence of our family. So, and then the stressors would be, syempre, no, the primary issue there would be financial loss. Okay. Uh, for many of us, if we are still getting paid during the ECQ, we are very fortunate. But we know that this is not the case for business owners, small scale enterprises, and then we talk about wage earners or daily paid workers. So financial loss is really one of the significant crisis that we would have. And then for those who are um, um, what do you call this, PUIs or PUMs, although I do know they already changed the terms to suspect, probable, and I forgot the other one, but they're stigma from others. Okay, and then you also have a stressor about getting back to one's normal routine. Okay, when will I go to the market again? When will I be able to sit in my faculty? When will faculty room again? When will I be able to have coffee with my friends? Or when will my kids go back to school again so that I don't have to homeschool them? Yeah, no, that's a possible concern. And then, yeah, no. So because of these stressors, we experience, naturally, we would experience considerable levels of stress. Okay? But when we talk about stress, we have different reactions and levels of susceptibility to stress. For example, people with pre existing mental health conditions could be suffering now, okay, more than others. And then we also have, of course, the level of exposure to the crisis. The first responders, the frontliners, okay, are facing possible issues of burnout, fatigue, etc. And then we have children. No? So actually, there's also a different way of explaining COVID-19 to children. No? So of course, we would have to customize, no, so to speak, our explanations about the crisis according to their level of cognitive development. And then we have to realize also that some people may be coping well, some people may not be coping well because of the differences in their levels of resilience, the quality of their social support, and all of the other factors that contribute to well being. And of course, we do know that one of the major health, what do you call this, health issues these days would be stress. However, it is extremely compounded because of the crisis. Now, stress has the ability to affect our immune system. I am sure you are very well acquainted with the effects of stress on your immune system. Okay. In relation to that, I would like us to look at. See. Okay. Ayan, I would like us to look at the stress reaction because the stress reaction is our response to the stressor. So when we talk about the stress reaction, Abrecht said that it's a coordinated mobilization of the entire human body to meet the requirements of life and death, struggle, or of rapid escape from the situation. The intensity of the stress reaction depends on the brain's perception of the severity of the situation. So if we look at it, our way of framing the stress, no? Kasi we talk about how the brain perceives the situation. Our way of framing the stress, no, cognitively, can also affect how we respond to the situation. So the stress reaction is our body's natural response to what is going on around us. And so, in this regard, I would like to talk about the general adaptation syndrome by Hans Selye. I'm pretty sure some of you po have encountered this already, but it talks about the stages of stress. Okay, so if you look at the x-axis, you would see there the time or the duration of the stress. Okay, so the longer a stressor lasts, the more our resources are worn out. So we talked about the first stage, which is alarm reaction. In alarm reaction, we are first our body senses that there is a stressor, and so we respond using the fight or flight responses of our body. So this is a state of alarm. Now our body, our mind would recognize that there is something that could possibly undermine our well-being. So that is alarm reaction. Now in stage 2 resistance, we actually mobilize our resources so that we can address the stress or the stressor. For some, the resistance can be adaptive. For some, it is not very adaptive. Okay. So examples of adaptive resistance would be addressing your concerns through problem solving methods. Okay. So for example, there's a very real issue of the COVID-19 crisis. So, what can you do? Yeah, no? So the brain would tell you, what can you do in this situation? What are the reasonable steps that I could take so that I could address this issue? Or, yeah, no? So, for example, yeah, you adhere to the government's advisory about social distancing, about frequent hand washing. Okay, yeah, no? Now, it can also be, ayan, I will hoard cleaning tools. I will hoard Zonrox and or alcohol so that I can protect myself from this crisis. Or it can be engaging in destructive coping patterns like although there's an alcohol ban now po, but probably for some who had their stash before the ECQ, they drink more frequently, they smoke more often, yan, so resistance. However, as the duration of the stress becomes more protracted, what happens is the body responds in a way that if the stress is still too severe, okay, eventually the resources of the person get depleted and it leads to stage 3 or what we would also call exhaustion. Okay. Um, well, first and foremost, probably even before the ECQ, we already had our own stressors. And so it's important to realize that we may be at a stage of healthy resistance at this point, but we also have to recognize when we are already nearing burnout or exhaustion. Okay. Now, there are some things that you have to look out for when you talk about stressors because usually there would be disruptions in how we function. Or that's what you call dysfunction, or you can also experience certain feelings of distress. Now, we have to understand that stress is not always necessarily problematic because we have what we would call eustress, which is the good stress, and would actually help optimize our performance. And we also have distress, okay, when our stress becomes too difficult to handle. Now, there are some things we have to look out for in this regard. Usually, it would affect our ability to go about doing our daily tasks or our life tasks. So, you have the first one, some things to look out for, changes in sleeping or eating. Okay. Now, it can work both ways. Sometimes our sleeping can be excessive. That's when you that's what we would call hypersomnia. Or of course, it can be too little insomnia. Now, insomnia can sometimes take the form of the classic form would be not being able to sleep early. Okay. Lying down in bed but not being able to get enough rest. And then we also talk about early awakening insomnia. And then there's also insomnia that is brought about by psychogenic causes or issues, critical issues that are bothering you in the psychological area. Now, you also have eating. It can also be too little or it can also be excessive. Now, I know that Filipinos have a love affair with food. However, that is why, I'm sorry, it is up to us to already evaluate if we are overeating. Yeah, no? And then, yeah, difficulty sleeping related to insomnia. And then, syempre, we also have difficulty concentrating. I believe some of us po have to work from home, okay? Or some of us have to bring home our reading materials. Yeah, no? So it can bring about, the stress can sometimes bring about difficulty concentrating. And it can also worsen some of our chronic health problems. No? Just to illustrate, I don't have a chronic health problem, but I can remember a time that I was extremely stressed and I had palpitations, I had chest pains. I honestly thought I was having a heart attack. Okay. And I was taken to the doctor. I had my ECG, I had everything done. And I was told, okay, there's nothing organically wrong with you. You are just stressed. And so, even us who work in the human service professions would not be exempt, no, from these um, experiences or these effects of stress. And sometimes it can also cause us to increase our use of alcohol, cigarettes, and other drugs. Sometimes it can also cause us to experience low motivation. Okay, so yeah, no. If before you used to work very quickly, very easily, you would find that probably in this situation, it's difficult to work. Yeah, low motivation. Okay, there, no? And then we also have what issues do our students, our teachers grapple with? Because I know that as school heads, um, I'm pretty sure that you're also worried or concerned about the issues that are bothering your students or your faculty members. So, because you are a leader, they are your concern. So probably some of the things that affect them would be what to expect when they return. I am not aware po if there's already a memo or um, if there's already guidelines for the conduct of studies. I'm sorry, I was just updated with CHED, so I don't really know about DepEd. But anyway, I mean the guidelines of DepEd. Sorry, but yeah, no, it's important that they know what to expect when they return. Probably you're also concerned about their student load. How much are they able to cover during the ECQ? Are they able to comply with their requirements? Would there be enough to come up with grades? Ayan. And then workload. Although I realized for DepEd pala, um, your school calendar po is until May. May. Okay. Okay. March. Sorry. So you have their workload or student load. And I'm not also sure if the teachers are also given workload tasks that they have to finish at home. Okay. And of course, being school heads, you're also concerned about their ongoing crisis, no? The issues that they face. Like I said a while ago, if prior to the ECQ they already had issues, probably it's weighing down heavily on you now because they may still be facing crisis. No, we hear of reports. For example, in Sunstar, I read that there was an attempted suicide of a 20-year-old female in Aurora Hill. Ayan, no? So, ayan, no? Although when we talk about suicide, naman, it's very multifactorial. So, we have to look into that also. Sige po.
O sige, habang Joby, Joby.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay ka ba dyan? Ayan.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Habang nag-fix si Ma'am Kryza ng kanyang may,
Yes, ma'am.
may meron siyang sinabi kanina kasi. Sabi niya, we have to communicate this pandemic well to our children. Paano mo
Yes.
yan ginagawa sa anak mo?
Yes, ma'am. It has to be different. Sabi nga ni ma'am kanina, the way you deal or the way you explain to children and to adult is different. For adult, of course, our concern is economy, how we will survive. But for children, their normal activity is suddenly interrupted. So, as a mother, siguro to explain them that we have to learn also how to change tasks. If before your only concern is or your only activity is just going to school, come to school, sleep, eat, well, it has to be a division of labor now that you have to learn to do home chores, adjust with having to stay at home because children basically would want to be outside, they want to be they're playful.
Yeah.
So, yun siguro, ma'am. The attack is different, of course. So, especially at yung ating mga ating mga elementary school heads, siguro, I was about to ask Ma'am Kryza, so how is the initial step to introduce or to tell our children about what's going on? Of course, what they see in the news is different. What the teacher would tell is also different.
Mm-mm.
So, yun siguro, ma'am.
Mm-mm.
Did I make sense?
Yes, ma'am. Yes po. Very valid question because, ma'am, especially for this time, I don't know po the age range of the children that you have, but of course, for little children, it's very
Yes.
important that they still are able to feel secure. So, for
Yes,
example, there
ma'am.
are some resources online that would present coronavirus as a story. They have a downloadable. Ma'am, maybe I can send it later. Although I do not know how to attach files from the chat, but probably I can email you po, ma'am, and send
Yes,
the
ma'am.
resource.
Yes,
But you
ma'am.
can actually look at these stories and tell them about the stories. This is applicable for those who are more concrete, no? Like 3 years, 4 years old to 6, probably. You can use the form of stories. They have a material that you can print out and show them. It makes the virus less threatening. Although, for example, for me, I tried it with my 5-year-old son, and I don't know if I was able. Honestly, I don't know if I was able to handle it adequately because every time I go out, he would say, "Mommy, don't go out. There's going to be you'll die. You'll get infected by
Infected.
the coronavirus." So, ayan po, we have to really be able to allay their concerns, their worries, their fears, so that they would feel that you are in control. So, for bigger kids, you can factually explain coronavirus and the measures that they can take so that they will not be infected or yan po. And then you can also model calm behavior, because actually the children would pick up from your responses. So if you're very anxious about it, they can sense it and they will also feel anxious. And so it's important that we're able to model healthy behavior talaga to them, no? And to manage their expectations. Like probably when school resumes, this is what's going to happen. Okay, so or we are not yet going to school, we have a schedule for going out. Ayun po, just explaining the practical side, no? Because actually children understand more than they let on naman po.
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, may we also get the opinion of our school heads, being the front
Ah, yes
line.
po.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, yes,
So,
yes,
if
ma'am.
somebody would like to share also, how would they first attack or the initiative or the initial step that they measure that they would do when they go back to school in terms of handling the crisis po?
Yes, yes. Opo.
Sige, anybody po from our school
Mm-hmm.
heads? Kasi of course, obviously will not go back to school and then bring out your books immediately and go
Yes
into details
po.
about the lesson. It will take a step for the children to be prepared that they are back to reality. So may we hear from them po?
Mm-mm. Ma'am, ay, okay. The participants po, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am Remy?
This time, ang mga bata, tinuturuan nila ang mga matatanda. They
Mm,
remind them of the activities, social distancing.
yes,
Pag
yes.
nakita nila sa picture, remind to wear our mask,
Mask.
Ah,
Yes.
hand washing, kasi kung minsan nakakalimutan. So yan ang situation sa akin. Kasi ang mga bata ko dito ay mga adults
Okay.
na, kaya they always remind. So parang
Mm,
uh, that is the effect of social media. They learn from social media, and then they're the ones telling me. So if
yes.
they read something, they share me. Ganun.
okay, okay. Okay, thank you, ma'am. Meron pa po before we go back to our speaker? So ano yung initial step na gagawin as an educator, as school head, when we get back to the school uh, in terms of managing this pandemic? Kasi as Ma'am Kryza told a while ago, the approach to children is different. Cognitive wise and all, it's different to adults. And yes, they see social media, they see in TV, but it's different if it's coming from the teacher. Ayun po. Parang they believe teacher more than what they see in the TV. So, ano kaya ang pwede nating, yung approach or mechanism in that sense po. Okay, back to you, Ma'am Krisha, kung wala po. Ay,
Ay,
meron
sige
ba?
ma'am.
Ay,
Yeah, Ma'am Joby.
yes,
Hello, good
ma'am.
morning. Good
Ay,
morning.
sir, sir.
Yeah.
Ay, si Sir Joseph po.
Yes, ma'am. Of course, we
Sige,
have
sige.
to prepare
Yes.
with us see to it that our school is ready
Opo.
in comes the opening of classes, and maybe we will prepare a checklist of everything. What should the pupils
Mm-hmm.
should do? So check number one, when you come to school, should be wearing mask. Should have some alcohol. You should be some if we continue the social distancing, we
Mm-hmm.
prepare. We prepare checklist, ma'am. Then include maybe a from time to time uh, you know, informations or updates to them, telling them what should be doing to them. So siguro in the first place yung muna orientation muna of children, filling up of the school because of what is happening. So
Okay,
ano
sige.
siguro.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes po, no, I think it's really important that they have a checklist to remind them of some behaviors that they have to observe while they are in school. Okay, so to
Yes, yes,
maintain
ma'am.
cleanliness, opo. And then probably to have some processing exercises like to have them draw or to have them make a collage of what they. I saw something po here sa chat. No, ask children the lessons they learned from cleanliness. Yeah, no, that's a possible activity. Or what they did during ECQ, what they learned about it. Okay, are there some fears that they have or some worries that they have? Because this would also help us po to understand where they are coming from. No? Children are very much able naman po to well, they communicate in different ways. Primarily, they communicate through play, but we can also make use of art na to help recognize if there are some concerns. Kasi probably we don't know. Some students may have been PUIs, PUMs, ayan, or they had family members who had COVID, or yeah, no. So it's important also to get to know their perspective, their perception about this, and ayan, I saw the briefing is also important. Opo, yes, we can probably identify the most vulnerable groups, and if we have counselors or counselor designates, we can help them
Mm.
identify as
Yes.
teachers. Of course, we know that we are the indispensable partners the teachers are indispensable partners in guidance, and so they're really the ones who would identify the students who have concerns na, about safety, etc., or even some of the more practical concerns. I think ACQ would really push us to have to look into not just the learning needs of our students, but also their emotional needs and also their basic needs, probably, no? So, ayan, no? So, prepare the school in all PPS needed, and let's do pupils share their experience. Yes po, this would be the basis of the teachers to begin their orientations and to include parents in their orientations. Yes, that's also very important, no, within the guidelines given by the government about how they would be able to get out. Ayan. So we also have to orient our parents, no, because like I mentioned a while ago, this situation is really very critical because of the uncertainty that it brings, and this can undermine our well-being, so it's really necessary. And then ayan po, no, and then I also saw okay po, explain to them the situation we are in. Yes, but actually they know more information. Yes, especially the Gen Z, no, the children born from 2000 onwards, they're very aware. They have social media accounts. They don't just have Facebook, they have Twitter. Kaya lang po, of course, if we are parents of teenagers, this is also one thing we have to recognize that we should also help them to limit their exposure to social media and media. Why? Kasi this also has the capacity to contribute to their mounting levels of stress. Because when you talk about social media being so connected, which is something I will be talking about later, when we are so connected, it actually has the capacity to make us feel as if the crisis is bigger than it is. Although it's big, okay, let us not undermine it, but let us not underestimate it. But when we talk about this, this is a situation where we need to be involved, but we also have to know when we need to detach, because studies would show that those who watch too much news now would actually feel that the crisis is very, very near them when it's actually not the case. So there. So maybe after na lang po the session, I can share my um, or okay po,
Yes, ma'am.
there. So, ma'am, if I do this, the video is still there. Sige po. There. So, um, there. So, probably for students and faculty, they can benefit from counseling during this time of COVID. I don't know po if there are some programs in place for your students to access you just in case they have some concerns. I don't know if you have a hotline. I don't know if your counselors or your designates are on standby. Okay. However po, for example, for high school students yan, who have pre-existing conditions, or for parents yan, or for non-frontliners, actually there is it's important that the school has a program. But if it's really difficult to institute at this time, kasi one of the trends that we have our practice now is to engage in telepsychology. So given the what you call this, the technical requirements. Probably not everyone has access to the internet. Okay, in this regard, there is a post by Sunflower Children's Center, which would encourage students or other anyone in need actually of counseling perhaps, or just somebody to talk to, to contact them, to get in touch with them through messenger or to call their number. Probably later I can send this to the group so that you can also get to refer some students that are struggling or have been struggling even before ECQ, or those who are really not okay now. So I know it's a small effort, but I am hoping that many clients will be reached through the initiative of Sunflower Children's Center. And then, of course, it's important to give them reasonable deadlines. For example, in the higher education institution I work for, a concern would be some students really do not have internet to submit their requirements. So, of course, we give them reasonable deadlines. Extensions, perhaps. Although I don't know po about the ma'am, nakapag-exam po yung mga students natin?
Hindi, not
Hindi
all.
Not all. Okay po. Although some were able. Ayan po. And then, also, they have to have clear-cut expectations about what they will be going back to. We have to understand po kasi that the COVID crisis is actually a disruption in their routine. And so, when we talk about helping them to destabilize, we have to give them guidelines that would help them to psych themselves and identify what they would be going back to, because it helps them to feel a sense of normalcy or stability. The knowledge that school will resume, kaya lang how will it resume? Ayan, no? They have to know that also. And then it's important that we encourage them to um, establish routines, healthy routines, okay, helpful routines, so that they can feel like I said a while ago, that there is still a sense of normalcy despite the difficulty of the situation. So probably for some who work from home, no, I actually saw some who would even take a bath, change, and then set their alarm, okay, eat breakfast, or even pack lunch, and then sit in front of their computer for a designated period of time. And then when it's done, that's when they end their work day, their new work day. No? So that's also another way of navigating the new normal. No? So routines are really especially helpful. Okay? So yun. Now, of course, we also go to the issues that you deal with, because while you are leaders and while you are members of the community, it's also healthy to think about you. What are you going through at this particular time? No? What are your concerns? What would worry you? So, in this regard, I'd like to talk about worrying. So when we talk about worrying, we know that sometimes there are people who worry more and there are people who worry less. Okay, but we all experience worrying. So if we look at worrying, we can liken it to a chain. No? This is the worry chain. Okay, and it's customized to um, reflect the experience of people, no, going through this crisis. Okay, so if you will see, the chain of thoughts can progress from simple worries to things that are more catastrophic, and they can have unlikely directions. For example, you can start with worrying about, I don't know if you can identify this as true in your own situations. Like, now, I have a headache. Okay, so during the ECQ, how many of us have had a headache? No, some probably due to work, some probably due to the take-home lessons of the children. Okay, some probably due to the inability to access transport. Yeah, no headache. And then you can progress to, oops, what if it's coronavirus? Yeah, no, did I have diarrhea? Did I have chest pains, etc.? Yeah, no. And then after that, they can say, maybe I passed it on to everyone at work yesterday. Oh my God, I infected others. Okay, I am like Coco Pimentel. Okay, so yeah, no. Or maybe I passed it to people at home. There, that's a very valid concern. And then You see, sometimes people can catastrophize and say, oh, everyone will pass it on and die. And then finally, yeah, you imagine an apocalypse and losing everyone you know and love. So our worry can actually progress now to a stage where we really start to think of things that are unlikely. Okay, and the thing is we feel that it is possible. Remember po, our brain has the capacity, our stress response is dependent on the perception, okay, of our of it's dependent on how we perceive the stressor. Okay, so yeah, no. So worrying can be accompanied by other physical pains. Now, we cannot disregard that there is indeed a mind and body connection. So worrying can be accompanied by muscle tension, aches and pains, restlessness, we fidget, we pace back and forth, or we have an inability to relax. It can also lead to difficulty concentrating, difficulty sleeping. Sorry, I have a typographical error. And then feeling easily fatigued. Ayan, no? So these are just some of the physical coordinates that can accompany worrying. And when does it happen? It happens when a situation is ambiguous, a situation is novel or new, a situation is unpredictable. And if we look at these conditions that bring about excessive worrying, we can see that coronavirus actually fits all of the criteria. No, for example, ambiguous, open to different interpretations. I don't think I have to explain it. No? And then novel and new. Okay, so in 1918 or 1908, we had the Spanish flu, but that was 100 years ago. How many of us can say we lived back then and say na we have something, we have an experience? uh, okay, we have an experience that we can fall back on. We have had experiences of flu, but this is a different kind of flu. So it's have we ever experienced ECQ? For me po, in my entire lifetime, no. Okay, so I don't know for others. Okay, so there, but we don't have any experience to fall back on, and it's unpredictable. We know when it's going to end. We know when the ECQ is going to end, but we don't know what's going to happen after that. Okay, will our lives be forever on hold, or has it forever changed how we do work, how we do school, etc.? Coronavirus can evoke extreme feelings of anxiety or worry for some of us. Now, it's very important in this situation, no? Kasi for example, we don't have access to situation to identify, okay? Are my worries hypothetical worries or are my worries real problem worries? So, for real problem worries, they are actual threats that we can address, we can find solutions for, like, uh, to prevent transmission of COVID, we practice social distancing, we wear our mask. Okay, for some, they even wear gloves. And then we isolate ourselves physically if we experience symptoms. Now, we also have hypothetical worries. However, our mind is not able to distinguish between real problem and hypothetical worries. Worries evoke the same intensity of feelings in us. No, so for hypothetical worries, these are when we start to think about the worst case scenarios, when we start to catastrophize, so to speak. So here, I saw this being shared by some of my colleagues on Facebook. I could not find the source, but it's from Facebook. But anyway, yeah. So the question we have to ask ourselves, diba, this is a modification of the uh, this is a modification of something that we use for the experiential learning cycle. Now you would see here, who do I want to be during COVID-19? Okay, so you can use this actually as a point of reflection. Personally, I used this when I was thinking, okay, so in the fear zone, yeah, I grabbed food, toilet paper, and medications that I don't need. Did you stock up on toilet paper? Did you stock up on biogesic? Did you stock up on all the medicines that you could think of? Yeah, no? Fear zone. I spread emotions related to fear and anger. I complain frequently. I forward all messages I receive. I get mad easily. It's very important to be self-aware. So you also know what zone you are in as of the moment. So probably, I don't know if you have already transitioned to the learning zone or the growth zone, or you're still in the fear zone. Okay, but some of us have very valid fears, and there are some who appear to be prophets of doom. They forward all messages they receive, anything that's scary. I could recognize myself in this. No? I get mad easily. Yeah, no, okay. So learning zone, there. It's important to start to give up what you cannot control. Okay, so I said a while ago that one of the basic needs that contribute to well being would be the ability to control a situation. But in this situation, we have to recognize what are we able to control and what can we not control. Okay, so there. No? So I'll elaborate more on that later. And then I stop compulsively consuming what hurts me, from food. Of course, we have to consider nutrition, to news. And you start to identify your emotions. You have to be merciful to yourself and recognize when your emotions are already going haywire. You do not deny them, you do not disregard them, you do not sweep them under the rug, but you recognize them and deal with them accordingly. Ayan. I become aware of the situation and think how to act. I evaluate information before spreading something false. Okay, for example, here in La Trinidad, there was a time that people shared a post about the places that a PUM visited. Ayan, no? Okay, so there, we have to evaluate. Is it damaging? Is it contributing to the knowledge of people? Is it contributing to their health? I recognize that we are all trying to do our best. So sometimes some of us may probably be triggered by what we see on the news. So it's also important to learn that probably at this time we are all trying to do our best given the resources that we have. And then finally, we have the growth zone. I think of others and see how to help them. Like I said a while ago, we have to find realistic ways of contributing to the community. I make my talents available to those who need them. No, probably po, you can upload some of your materials, yan, no? Some of the things that you think could be able to help other school heads. I live in the present, but despite living in the present, I'm also capable of focusing on the future. I'm empathetic with myself and with others. I think and appreciate others. Yan po. So all of these behaviors would reflect that you have transitioned from the fear zone to the growth zone. However, to get there, you have to be realistic about the things that you do for yourself. Okay? Because you are a leader, but you are human too. So it's important to do these things. Okay, so first and foremost, you have to maintain balance. You have to be able to disconnect and connect at the same time. You have to form healthy attachments. Also, have to take care of yourself. I think self care is the new language of this generation. Okay, so maintain balance. Okay, because it allows you to give more. Now, you cannot expect to be running on empty. So you really have to take care of yourself. And you have to identify real versus hypothetical. I will be showing you a worry tree that I saw from an online resource that would help you to identify if your fear is real or hypothetical. And then speak to yourself with compassion. Okay, for example, a very helpful statement could be, this is what I am going through now, okay, but it is normal. Okay, so some of you may be thinking, oh, why am I so overwhelmed? Why do I feel like this is not me? This is not my usual self. Okay, speak to yourself with compassion. You can probably say, what I am going through, or what I am feeling, or what I am experiencing is a normal response to an abnormal situation. So be compassionate, not just to yourself, but to others. And then finally, postpone your worry. Okay, this is something that may seem unusual, okay, but you can actually postpone your worry. How? Um, you can set aside a chunk of time in the day when you will start to worry, when you will be allowed to deliberately worry. Okay, so there. Now, for example, today's it's already 11:20 in the morning. I will set my worry time to 1 p.m. to 1:30. Okay, during that time, or you can set it at night, as long as you can sleep well, why not? But you find the time that you can actually lump together all of your worries and worry as much as you can. And then realistically evaluate. Okay, wait lang. This is what I am worried about. Is it valid? Is it real? Or is it just hypothetical? Am I just catastrophizing? Yeah, no? So that's a concern. Okay, so you have to use this decision tree to help you notice the real problem versus a hypothetical worry. Okay? So, for example po, yan, what am I worrying about? Siguro po sa chat, can I see po some things that some of us are probably worrying about? Ay, although I cannot see po pala. Ayan. Uh, yan. Ayan, I see po some suggestions. Okay. All right. Some things that we worry about. Meron po ba?
Okay, Ma'am Mary Jane, you're recognized to talk.
Rethinking mental health. Oh, okay po.
Nakamute ba siya?
Or kahit po sa chat, kung hindi po just an example po.
Ma'am Kryza.
Yes, ma'am.
Ayan. Hi, can you see me? Ayan. I'm worried about, what am I worried about? Galing kasi ako sa grocery kaninang umaga. So when I came in, I'm worried about being contracted by the virus. So I got the alcohol spray and then sprayed my way all out until I reached the door.
Oh, okay, ma'am. So, ayan po meron. Ayan, that's a very apt example no of some of the worries we encounter now that we have ECQ. So, ayan po, what are you worrying about? So, when you use the worrying tree, for example, ayan po, no, you can really have to ask yourself, what are the things that I am afraid of? So, yan, Ma'am Sor went to the grocery this morning, and she was worried that she might have contracted the disease, and so she sprayed alcohol. Okay, so everywhere. Is it a hypothetical worry or is it a real worry? Okay, in the current situation, it is a real worry. So we really have to be careful no, about the things that we are worried about here po. If I may just return the ano. Okay, so is this a problem I can do something about? Probably yes. No, Ma'am Sor already mentioned that she did something. Okay, so work out what you could do. List your options. Okay, so for example, some people who work in the medical field, no, do not touch their family members. Do not hug or kiss them right after they get home. They have to go directly to the washroom, okay, to freshen up and to clean themselves, to disinfect. Okay, so yeah, no, that's an option. So what are your options? Yeah, you can spray alcohol all over the place, ayan, or use Lysol, okay, to kill the virus. You can have a foot bath at home, no? You can mix up a solution that would clean your shoes, because they say that the coronavirus sticks to our footwear as well. So there, no, you have to check your options. Is there anything I can do now? Okay, if there is, do it now. And then if you have already done what you need to do, then you let go of the worry, because it's no longer important. It's going to tax your mental resources or your emotional resources if you simply allow the worry to bother you incessantly. Okay, but let's be considerate also. There are some who really have, let's say, GAD, generalized anxiety disorders, where their anxiety is really free floating. So they're naturally anxious. Of course, that's a different case scenario, but this would also actually help them. It's a very good grounding exercise, no? Just the moment that you experience your worry, you list it down and you identify, is it real or is it simply hypothetical? Okay, so if your problem is real, but you cannot do anything about it now, okay, then you could consider your future time perspective. You know, it's very important to have hope in this current situation and to maintain our future time perspective. Because while we focus on the present, we also consider what will happen in the future. Okay, so we plan what we could do, when we could do it, and when we will do it, and how we will do it. And then, if we have already mapped out the solutions that we have in our head and we already are satisfied with how we have planned, then we let the worry go. The problem with many of us is that we have difficulty letting our worry go. So we have to find a place, no, where we could put it. No, we could write it down. I really encourage journaling. No, we could write it down, and then, after this ECQ ends, probably you can look back and see what you were thinking, what you were feeling during this time, and it's something that you can share. How you overcame it, how you went through, how you got through it, etc. So it's very important. So we postpone our worry, okay, to a reasonable time when we could lump everything together and not just allow it um, to permeate our entire uh, life space, so to speak. No? We have, ako personally, my realization during the ECQ was, we are when we live in a state of perpetual worry and fear, we actually rob ourselves of the joy of being in the present moment. I could not count the number of times during ECQ that there was a battle going on in my head, and I missed out on some moments. Let's say some happy moments with my children, or fun moments, because I was very preoccupied. And this does not just apply to ECQ; it applies to um, our lives in general. How are we living our lives with intentionality? We have to think, we have to evaluate. Okay, in fact, I saw something the other day and I was really amazed by it, no? Kasi it said, you have to consider what are the things that will happen after ECQ. Okay, so when we revert to how life was before, I don't know if it will ever happen, but if we do revert to how life was before, will it be something, or we have to consider, is this still something worth going back to? Okay, so there, no? So, yan. And we have to practice self-compassion. So when we talk about self-compassion, I believe if we have engaged in the teaching profession, we have compassion. I don't think anyone could last long in the teaching profession without having compassion for others. However, do not apply it to yourself, because I repeat, you are a leader, but you're human too. So when we talk about self-compassion, it has three components. Now you have their self-kindness versus self-judgment versus, and then you have mindfulness versus isolation, and then we have their shared humanity or common humanity versus over identification. So this is a concept introduced by Nev, which we really encourage others to practice. So When we make mistakes, are we so hard on ourselves? If yes, we have to learn self compassion. So, when you talk about self kindness, this is very simple. It's actually understanding ourselves and the fact that we are imperfect. Okay, so if we understand others, why not practice understanding ourselves as well? Then we also have to practice mindfulness. Okay, so we realize that we are all vulnerable and imperfect, and we observe our thoughts and feelings as they are without denying or suppressing them, which is why I said we really have to be self-aware. No, we really have to notice what are the thoughts going through my head now, what are my feelings now, and we don't simply deny them. Okay, we don't say I know, I don't experience that because I'm strong. Yeah, no, that's something I don't experience because well, ano ba, I'm basta I'm strong. Yeah, no? So, or I'm not allowed to experience that because somebody needs me. Okay, so be compassionate to yourself. It's okay to not be okay, and to actually acknowledge and recognize that you are not okay. And also, you have their common humanity when you realize that, oops, despite what I am going through, this is common humanity versus over identification. So, despite what I am going through, I am not alone. There are other people who experience this too, which is why I framed my discussion in a way that I talked about what we all go through, and then we move to what others go through, and then what you would go through. Now, I'd like you to go back to that and realize that common humanity is when we start to realize that we are all experiencing, or probably all experiencing, the same things. It may be to different extents, but we are all going through the same thing. Okay, so given that knowledge, we know when to stop so that we do not get caught up in negative reactivity. Take note, negative thoughts have the capacity to impact our immune system. Okay, so there. So here, it's very important to honestly assess not just your physical health. Filipinos have this tendency to express negative emotions as physical symptoms. Okay, for example, ang sakit ng tiyan ko, my stomach is painful when they are anxious. Or my head is painful when they are angry. Ayan, no? So, don't just assess your physical health. Be honest with yourself and tell yourself, how am I psychologically? What am I feeling now? What am I thinking now? Because if you look at it, self-compassion is not selfish. So is self-care. Self-care is not being selfish. It is simply allowing yourself to replenish your reserves so that when you go back, you are better. Okay, there, you're restored. Okay, so help-seeking behaviors are encouraged. If you are really not okay, you may seek help. Okay? You can call Sunflower. Actually po, I'm one of the volunteers there. So, just in case, if you would be willing to be a client, ayan po, we have a schedule there. Okay? So, help-seeking behaviors are encouraged. Okay? So, also, what are some of the things you can do? I already mentioned it a while ago. Establish a routine and then plan activities that make you feel good. Anything that makes you feel good. Coffee in the morning, sa terrace nyo, ayan, no? Okay, playing with your children, watching a movie, okay? So, do things that you thought you could never do, okay? Because you always thought you didn't have the time. Okay, so plan activities that make you feel good. They don't have to be um, very fancy. Okay, you can just have a time to disconnect, for example, from your family. Okay, a time to read a book you've always wanted to read. So a time to meditate, to relax, to do breathing exercises. And again, shared humanity, common humanity. Remember that you are not alone in this situation. And the last one, for self-care, no, some tips you can do, although there's more. Pursue opportunities for intellectual stimulation. Okay, I know that this is not a normal situation. If you don't feel the motivation to do things intellectual, then don't. Okay, but if you are interested, there are so many free courses, especially online. It's amazing. Many research databases have opened up they have free subscriptions. You can download some of their webinars, and for as long as you have the resources, pursue opportunities. UPOU, for example, has a lot of free courses. Some of them are until April 29. Interestingly, some of the courses there are about converting your um, classes to online classes. Ayan, no? And then you also have Coursera.org. They have very interesting courses depending on your field. Okay. And then you also have udemy.com, which would offer some courses. I know there are some other, actually even the arts, no, there are even some shows, no, that would make their subscriptions free. You can watch them. So there are so many opportunities, kaya lang po online, no, that are being provided for intellectual stimulation. I think it's also the agencies or companies way of giving back to the people during this time. And so ayan, okay. And some self-care strategies, primarily to you unplug, but you also know when you need to connect. Okay, so for unplug, I don't think this fits pala in the ano, pero look for reputable news sources. Okay, look for the official announcements. No, let's not be carried away by sharing um, things that are not yet verified. You need to take time to validate. Why? Because you might be, putting so much more pressure. I mean, if you're okay, pero others who see your posts would be so affected, you be considerate also. And then don't get inundated with too much information. If you know what you need to know, then stop there. If you don't need to know other things anymore, if you already know everything you need to know about COVID, stop there. Validate information. Yeah, that's related to number one. Look for reputable news sources. Limit the media you take in. Like I said a while ago, when your social media is so active, for example, you feel that the crisis is very near you. Well, it's near, but um, it's not as severe, okay, as others. Okay, so there. And then postpone major life changes. Unplug. I think now is not the time to think about um, well, it's a time to think about, let's say, career. It's a time to think about your marriage. It's a time to think about if your children, etc., etc. But do not make decisions as of the moment. Postpone major life changes. Okay, so allow yourself to go back to a certain level of stability before you make major life changes. Okay, and then connect. Surprisingly, now is the time that we have more opportunities, okay, to connect with some relatives we haven't messaged for a while, or friends. And so resolve personal conflicts at home, for example. If your relationship with your kids or your husband or your wife or your friends would not be that okay, take personal conflicts. Again, I emphasize engage in help-seeking behavior, communicate and collaborate. Okay, if you have a family or siblings at home, and some of them would disturb you when you're working, okay, just collaborate with them, no? Let them know of a schedule that you will work. Okay, so let's say, for example, kabsat from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Please do not disturb me. I will be doing this. Ayan, no? So, and then maybe after me, you can have your turn. Okay, so there, communicate and collaborate. And then when we communicate, for example, we are frustrated, it's very important to always use I statements, because when we make use of you statements, another person to whom you're communicating can become defensive. So you say, I felt bad when you did this. Okay. more than saying you always do this. Okay, there's a difference, no? Because a person would be more attuned to listen to you if you are not blaming him or her. So that's one way of communicating and collaborating. Okay, so even with your children, no, explain to them when you have to lock yourself up somewhere and work. Yan. And find ways to be involved in the community. There are many opportunities for I'm sorry, for volunteering. No, you just find what works for you. If you're not comfortable with being there physically, then if you have adequate resources, you can send your resources. I think this is a time when people are generally more generous. Okay, and that's one of the positive offshoots of COVID. We get to see many stories about acts of compassion and kindness in the community, and it's encouraging. It strengthens people. For example, frontliners, no, when they see people giving or sharing, etc. And even those in areas, probably your neighbors, siguro if you know they're not okay, give them a check on them. Sorry, there. And then professional self-care. There are so many kinds of self-care: spiritual, physical, emotional. I don't think I have to tell you that, but I may have to tell you. Okay, so to eat healthy food, because there's also a gut and mind connection. For example, those who consume more processed foods are at risk for more are at risk for some mental health disorders. So as much as possible, eat the kinds of food that are nutrition dense and are also affordable. Okay, so yan. Okay, so there. So professional self-care. Ayan, you have physical self-care, you have to exercise, carve time to exercise, kahit konting walking, stretching. We said you have to have 10,000 steps a day. If you have stairs, go up and down the stairs. And I know our cell phones, our smartphones, many of us have smartphones. They also have a pedometer. Take advantage of it. They can count your steps. No, at least have 10,000 steps in a day. Okay, if you don't have space at home, walk in place. Okay, so it's very helpful for maintaining mental health. And then, yeah, no, get adequate sleep. Get adequate sleep unless you're already bothered, no, sa sleep patterns nyo. Make sure to get adequate rest. No, we are like plants. We need sunlight. Also, we need water. We need adequate nutrition. It's also helpful to still maintain your time for waking up. I'm sure many of you don't have difficulty with that. If you can wake up at 6 pa rin, by all means do so. Get some sunlight. It's helpful. We also teach our children, if they are teenagers, we teach them to disconnect, to unplug. Our students also, when we go back, we teach them to not have a highly developed digital self, but their offline selves are not enhanced. No? So, ayan, we have to learn to a room perhaps where you can stay uninterrupted, and then seek out healthy role models. Are there people whom you know are very much able to have work-life balance? Yan. Are there people whom you know who recognize when they need help, etc.? And then communicate, negotiate. If there are some deadlines that you really cannot meet, then say so. Okay. And then learn to say no. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Yes po. Learn to say no. Okay. Now we have to remember this is a marathon. I like this. This is a marathon, not a sprint. It's not about how fast we get to the finish line. It's about how we are able to endure. And even if it is a marathon, it will not last forever and the epidemic will end. We don't know when, but it's going to end. And so we know that in marathons, we have to have strength and endurance. So I hope that somehow this talk has helped you to think of ways by which you can be able to endure, okay, for a longer period of time. And then, of course, we cannot overemphasize a certain level of spirituality. And I like this verse since I'll be sending the slides naman po. I like Psalms 91. Okay, it really talks about believing in somebody who is stronger than us, who is sovereign in this situation. Um, in our human, if we just make use of our human capacity, it's not going to be adequate. And so we really have to be anchored on something bigger and someone bigger than ourselves. So I really like Psalm 91. It says, "Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty." And I like it here. He is my refuge. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. And He will save us from the fowler's snare and from deadly pestilence. And you can read on that and just think about the goodness of God in this situation. So I think I am done. I have po my contact number there. My email would also be there. Okay po. And then, yan. All right. So, okay na po, ma'am. Thank you very much. Um,
I Okay na. Okay, sige. So, thank you, ma'am, for sharing us a topic that we really need because we have to be prepared. The time comes that ECQ is lifted. How are we going to face the real world when we get back to our normal situation? Although this is from the new normal that we do already, but of course, we all still pray that we go back to the normal self that we've been doing, the process that we've been doing, just like this professional development where I can see the possibility, it's possible pala that we can accommodate this number, no? It's nice because we see the sharing in the chat box aside from those who shared. So unless there are any other sharing before we wrap up and we finally end, do we have from Ma'am Soraya, meron ba? Before I
Yes,
do my
yeah.
own wrap
Thank
up
you.
also. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Joby, no? Thank you
Yes,
very
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ma'am Kryza, no?
thank
Tulong.
you po.
Malaking tulong itong parang group counseling, no?
Yes, ma'am.
uh, for us to transition, it is very difficult. Right now, your session about identifying where we are in the scale of worrying is still something that we will have to churn every day yan. Kasi we tend to get back to the normal, yung sabi ni Joby, we want to get back to the normal thing, but it's not happening actually. It's not really happening. So, nakaka-transition itong session mo for us to start, yung parang yung how to transition into this new situation that we are in. Thank you for bringing us into this kind of world. Nakakatulong because in the next few weeks, we will be back to work, no? So thank you very much, Ma'am Kryza. You have grown so
You.
no, Ma'am Kryza. Now, very, very helpful. Nakakatulong talaga itong session mo on mental health balance. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Ma'am Soraya. Is there any
Thank
other
you,
thing
ma'am.
you would like to clarify before we wrap up? Baka meron pang hindi masyadong clear from the participants and they would like to be heard by our speaker, kung meron po. Wala. Okay, so if none, so wala po. So kung wala, yes, you have question? Sino po yun, ma'am?
Parang may nakita po akong question sa chat, ma'am.
Yes. May question ba dito? In fact, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Meron akong na-quote, ma'am, that caught my attention here from Ma'am Osang. Sabi niya, the level of stress daw in the workplace is higher compared to the work from home. Ang sabi niya, work from home because you can work comfortably with pajamas.
Opo, opo.
without having to rush. Yun po ang nakita ko na nakakatch ang aking attention. Idea ni Ma'am
Yes.
Rosana.
Opo. Actually, it's a very valid, ano po, it's a very concern. Kasi actually, stress naman is not just the magnitude of the stress, like something like COVID, but stress can also be the cumulative experiences that we have day by day. And if we look at it, the stressors can also be, ayan, commute, having to rush every day, ayan, having
Yes.
to balance all of the activities we have to do. And actually, ECQ is an opportunity for us to
Yes.
pause, ayan,
Yes
reset,
po.
stop. And so maybe you can also apply, no, the if there is something that you got go from the talk, you can also apply it to when things resume to their new normal. Kasi po,
Yes. Okay.
totoo naman po kasi, the stress of daily life is also very taxing. Po.
Yes po. Yes, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. So, yun ang isa kong nakita, ma'am. So with that, would like to just give just a brief wrap up of what was was discussed with us this morning. And it's true that we are to undergo different zones, from the fear zone to the learning zone and to the growth zone. What the most important is, in the growth zone, we have a lot of realizations that we became compassionate, we adapt to new things, we appreciate others. Siguro yung mga bagay na hindi natin nagawa before, because of the ECQ, we have learned to appreciate the little things that people do to us. And we began to think of others, not just thinking of ourselves, but thinking of others. So it's overwhelming po, ma'am, that you're able to present this to prepare us, because in a few weeks' time, we will be back to work. And as was discussed, we have to cope with a lot of coping mechanism to prepare us all to go back to work coming in siguro May. So with that, ma'am, kung wala na po, so in behalf of SDO Baguio, ma'am, the school heads, the non-teaching group, the different divisions in SDO, we'd like to thank you, ma'am, for taking your time to be our speaker for today. So till
Thank you
next
very much.
knowledge sharing, if there will be topics still that we need you, ma'am. So, yun po,
Salamat
ma'am.
po. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
So yun po, ma'am. So thank you again. Thank you for the participants. Ma'am Sor, thank you also. Thank you for the support and for initiating our knowledge sharing. We are just a support here. So thank you, ma'am.
Thank you
Good
very
day.
much.
Good day
Good
po.
day.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. Good job, Joby, Harry. Sino pa? Is LV here? Is LV?
Yes.
Si LV?
Miss Azon also. Miss Azon.
And Miss Asun.
Thank
Okay.
you. They are
Good job, team.
Sila yung nagdo-document, ma'am.
Ay, very good, very good. Oh, marami, no? So, marami
Yes.
we can do the debriefing na, no?
Yes, ma'am.
Pwede kayong mag-debrief din. Ma'am Kryza, no? Ma'am Kryza, salamat.
Salamat, ma'am.
In touch with you, Kryza, no?
Okay po.
With you. Kumusta ka na? Kumusta na yung anak?
Mama kulit po.
Oh, yeah. Ang galing. You're very kind. Thank you so much. Please share the resources so we can share to the school heads.
Okay po, ma'am. I will send it through email.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Bye, ma'am.
We will get in touch with you. Yeah, bye-bye. We'll not keep you long.
Thank you po. Bye, ma'am.
Bye-bye.